tonight for our Churches of Restoration meetup, we have Pastor Gerry Koning with us from the Refuge Church in Grandville, Michigan. I am delighted to introduce Gerry. He kindly provided a bio. So I will tell you a little bit about him, and then I'm going to hand it over to him. He's got a great set of slides to walk us through, and then we will have time for discussion and taking some questions at the end. So Gerry graduated from Calvin Theological Seminary back in 1985 and then moved with his family to El Salvador to work with churches and to teach. After that, they moved to Boston, Massachusetts, and then later to Western Michigan, where they've been for the past 34 years, pastoring a couple of different churches. So currently, the Refuge Church. Gerry's wife, Laura, works as an elementary Spanish and special education instructor, and they have four. They have four children living across the U.S. And his free time, Gerry enjoys fly fishing, canoeing, and helping others to learn to love the beauty of God's creation. So that's a little snapshot about Gerry. Hopefully, we'll continue to learn more about him as he speaks from his heart about some of the awesome work that he's gotten to do with the Refuge. Gerry, I will hand it over to you, and we look forward to learning from you.
All right. Well, thank you very much. This is a kind of an honor and a privilege to work with so many people that are so interested in caring for creation. So I would just like to share a few slides about what we've been doing at the Refuge, understanding that we have been doing this about 17 years. So we started very small also. And so sometimes if you get a presentation that, oh, you do this and this and this and this and this, you think, that's a lot. But this is the accumulation of 17 years of working in creation care and experimenting, failing, trying again, and trying to make things work. And this is kind of where we're at. So if I can share my screen, creation care at the Refuge, and we say, why water? Because we began with water. And this has been kind of a learning curve for us, but we, in my own pastoral studies and stuff, I've come to realize how rivers and water are so important for bringing life in creation. And so we really think that water brings life. So in creation, there was a river that came out of Eden that broke up into four other rivers, which I believe are the four corners of the world. And all of life was watered by that river. And then you get to Ezekiel 30 or 47, and God's planning a new thing, some new life. And then there's another river coming out of the altar in the temple, and it flows down the Kidron Valley and into the Dead Sea, where it makes the Salt Sea live. And there's a verse in that chapter, verse 9 of chapter 47, that says, swarms of living creature will live wherever the river flows. There will be large numbers of fish because the water flows there and makes the salt water fresh. So the river flows, wherever the river flows, everything will live, which I think is really pretty cool. And then you get to the last chapter of the Bible, Revelation, and there the angel shows the Apostle John the river of water, the river of life, clear as crystal, flowing from the throne of God and the Lamb down the middle of the great street of the city. On each side of the river stood the tree of life, bearing 12 crops of fruit, yielding its fruit every month, and the leaves of the trees are for the healing of the nations. No longer will there be any curse. So we've come to realize how important, either metaphorically or real in life, rivers are. So when we were thinking about doing something, we wanted to get more involved in our community. And we thought, well, what should we do to engage the community? Because our church was not very good in engaging the community. So we just thought, well, maybe we'll adopt a road. And we thought about that, looked into that. You can get the sign in the place and say, this road has been adopted by this church. And we didn't think so. So then we said, adopt a stream. And all of a sudden, people's ears perked up and said, wow, they never heard of doing that. What does it mean? And there happens to be a nice stream just a block away from our church and a tributary of that stream, which runs through our property. And we said, that's the thing. So in 2008, we adopted Rush Creek, which runs right next to our church property. And that has become, you might say, our place where we wanted to begin caring for God's creation right there in that creek. Then we learned, though, that not only is there just a stream, but it's a part of a watershed. So the Rush Creek watershed, which is that map there, is actually about 52 square miles. And anything in that map that gets blown into a drain, chemicals, lawn fertilizers, plastics, water bottles, styrofoam, it all runs down Rush Creek. And as you can see, our church is right by the mouth of Rush Creek where it flows into the Grand River. So anything that falls, any water bottle that falls, or anything that gets washed down a drain, basically flows past our church. And so we said, we should do something so we don't get as much of this pollution coming down here. So it became a natural thing. So we did that. And then we were challenged by a local environmental group to start doing macroinvertebrate surveys on Rush Creek. It says, what do you do if you adopt a creek? You can say, well, it's ours, you can clean it, but what are you going to do? So we were challenged to do macroinvertebrate studies. We didn't know what they were. We're going very naively into this. So we started doing macroinvertebrate studies, and we got some help from a local conservation group that was teaching us how to do this. Well, then after we did a while, we were encouraged to apply for a grant from the Michigan Clean Water Course for training and supplies to continue our surveys. And very unlikely, but we were awarded $18,000 for 3 years to train ourselves, get the equipment we needed to do this. And a church had never gotten a grant like this before. There hasn't been a church since that has gotten a grant like this. We're the only ones that applied. One of the reasons is it's difficult because you have to have a certain financial accountability and auditing that is accepted by the state, and we just didn't have the resources to do that. So somebody that we knew that was in the township office, he was the superintendent, said, I'll be your fiduciary for it. And so all of a sudden we had a fiduciary, and the grant went through them, and we got it. And with that grant, we've trained all kinds of people to do the same, probably over 100 people that we've trained to do macroinvertebrate surveys. We work regularly with a couple of local high schools to teach their classes to do that and help them do that. And then all of a sudden, a lot of doors open to other things. Just this past week, I was in the creek for a day with a senior student of Grand Valley State University, was doing a senior project on mussels and macroinvertebrate studies. Their professor said, well, if you want to do that, the person who knows the most about that in this area is Pastor Gerry Koning in Rush Creek. So why don't you contact him, and he can be your resource for doing your senior project. So we're working on her senior project together, and that's just been a lot of fun. It was rather unusual that we did something like that, and so our denominational publication picked it up and ran with it and said, hey, this is a church that's doing earthkeeping in action. That's what they said. That was actually in 2010, I think, when that magazine came out. Well, our macroinvertebrate studies have led us to start doing freshwater mussel surveys, because as we were going in some parts of the creek looking for bugs and recording what we were finding quite a few mussels, and we know nothing about that. So we started trying to educate ourselves and actually got a graduate student to help us do some surveys. We realized that mussels also play a key indicator in how the health of a watershed is. And some of the mussels we were finding were endangered species. Our rivers and streams, and especially in the eastern part of the United States, were just filled with mussels, until about the turn of the last century, when they realized that they could make buttons out of their shells. And then anybody that was anybody was starting to go through our streams and rivers, collecting mussels, killing them, and bringing them to places where they're punching out buttons. And so those are the mother of pearl buttons that you might find on some older garments or like that. But by millions and millions and millions of mussels were killed. And it's unfortunate because they're such good filters. They cleanse the water. A larger mussel will filter about 5 or 6 gallons of water a day. And if you got thousands and thousands of them, they actually keep our rivers clean. That's, God created them for a beautiful purpose of doing that. And so we're working hard at trying to make sure that the habitat is good for keeping our mussels there. The other thing that we've found when we've looked for mussels and is they're just beautiful creatures that God has created for us to enjoy, and nobody really knows anything about them. I have a little video of a Lampsilis mussel, which is also called a pocketbook, a female one that's displaying her lure. It's you can see the mussel on the right-hand side of that screen. You can see the kind of the shell of that mussel, and then there's the mantle that's sticking up. That actually looks like a little fish there. You can see it. There's an eye on there. There's some like fins on there. There's stripes on there. And what she is trying to do is she's trying to attract a fish, either a largemouth bass or a green sunfish, which are in our stream. And she has eggs in her body that need to be put into the mouth of a fish. And she relates only to largemouth bass or green sunfish. And so that lure is there to attract that fish close enough to her, and they'll bite at that lure thinking it's a real fish. And then when they bite at that lure, these little eggs, which are called glochidia, they look like Pac-Man. They will come out with their mouths open into the mouth of the bass or green sunfish, and they'll latch onto the gills, and they'll start sucking blood. And there'll be hundreds of them in that mouth of that bass or green sunfish, and they'll be sucking blood for a month or maybe 2 months until they formed a shell around them. And then they release and they fall into the substrate and bury themselves in the substrate for about 2 years. And then they emerge fully formed but small, and the life cycle starts again. But those things are amazing. There's very few people in the United States that has ever seen Lampsilis mussel display its lure. But they're happening all the time, all the way around us. We just don't take the time to look and see what's going on and watching some of the beauty of creation, which I think helps us care for creation then even more. So our work in the Rush Creek Watershed kind of launched several other creation care projects. We presently do an annual cleanup of Rush Creek, which is a very popular thing. Get in the river, bring a canoe or two, depending upon how much junk you find, and get on our waders. And we just walk the creek for several miles, picking up trash, doing that. And that's been a lot of fun for us to do, and kids and adults and everybody can get involved. We've built a rain garden because we know that the water that rushes into some of our creeks takes a lot of chemicals with it. This is a rain garden we put on by our parking lot. We chose a section of our parking lot that runs all into this area. It used to run directly into the creek, which just is left of the garden there. And so we made our rain garden large enough that every time we had a half-inch rain event, it would produce about 5,000 gallons of water. And so that rain garden holds 5,000 gallons of water. And instead of running directly into the creek, it gets absorbed or by the plants that are now in there, or it leaches in there through the creek, which just purifies the water. And since we get about 30 inches of rain a year here, that's about 150,000 gallons of water that we keep from running directly into the creek, and all the pollutants that would go in with it into the creek. And it wasn't really that big of a thing. It just cost us a few $100s to build it, with a lot of labor and help from our volunteers. And for us, it was a significant thing to do and show people, hey, this is something that you can do to prevent some of the runoff into some of our streams. We also, since we're digging into gardens, we thought, well, let's do an organic garden for our neighborhood. So we do an organic garden in our neighborhood. This is really quite close to the creek, but we have the raised beds, and we work with a lot of refugees in our community. and they love to grow things. They consider it their farm. They call it their farm, and they want to go to their farm, and they're growing all kinds of greens and stuff that they couldn't easily find here in some of the stores. And so it's a community just get together and we share things out of our rain garden, or excuse me, out of our vegetable garden. It's been a lot of fun. It's connected us to a lot of refugees and people in our community. We also realize the amount of salt, especially in Michigan. You get snow and they start just putting salt on the roads like crazy. So we do salt testing on Kennewa Creek and Rush Creek using the material from the Salt Watch from the Isaac Walton League, which are very helpful. This is me actually yesterday. We did have a bunch of snow, so I was out there. I collect water every week at Kennewa Creek and Rush Creek. That's Kennewa Creek kind of running into Rush Creek. You see the water on the right is Kennewa Creek. The main body of water is Rush Creek. So I take a sample from Kennewa Creek and a sample from Rush Creek. And the samples, you can see them. It's just very predictable. It spikes right after we've had a snow event and they've put salt on the roads and it started to melt and started to run in. The chloride in the water just begins to spike. And another thing is the little Kennewa Creek that runs in there is always 3 times higher the amount of salt in the water than in Rush Creek, even though it's bigger. And that's, we think, because it drains from a shopping mall where they have a lot of parking lots. And they put a lot of salt in parking lots because of liability things. There's no restrictions for how much salt you can put down. In some places, there are restrictions for salt. In a shopping mall like that or private place, there's no restrictions. And so we're trying to accumulate data that will help us to indicate to that and try to begin to speak to the powers that be, whether it's our city or that maybe there's some things you can do to start some best practices you can do for managing snow with salt in a different way so that we don't have that. But we wanted to get the data first before we go to them. And so we're going on our second year of data with that. But I would just want to introduce the Isaac Walton League to you. If you've never been a part of or seen the part of the Isaac Walton League and you want to get involved in caring for creation, they're very, very good. Their address, their email, or their website is up there, iwla.org, I believe. And they provide the salt and nitrogen testing kits. They provide online training to do macroinvertebrate surveys. They got training to generally monitor a stream. They have an app you can download for macroinvertebrate identification. But if you don't know where to turn to and you want to get engaged in doing something in a local watershed, the Isaac Walton League is a really, really good place to start. They have lots of materials and they're good people to work with. We've had a good relationship with them. So being outdoors as much as we have, and I guess during the time of COVID too, we realized we didn't want to stop some of the things we were doing as far as teaching in Sunday school. And so we decided let's just do them outside. We're spending a lot of time outside anyway. So what we did is we built what we call our creation station. First, we wanted to get a suspension bridge across the creek. So the kids had a way to get there. And they really love this. They call it the bouncy bridge. But that goes across Kennewa Creek on our property over to our station. And there we just put up 6 posts, a tarp over the top hung between 2 trees on a strap. And then we got some rough cut wood on the lower sections, put a fire pit right in the center and a bunch of stumps and a homemade chalkboard up there because we want to go low tech with all this stuff. And then that's where we have our Sunday school. We've had it out there for the past 3 years. We meet every other Sunday afternoon or 2 Sunday afternoons a week. We begin in September, we end in May, and we go straight through the winter time. As you can see, kids don't mind. They just get dressed for the snow, stay by the fire. We always have a treat, so they might be cooking something over the fire at the end of the lesson. We always have hot chocolate out there for them. There's a bunch of things to climb on. You can see some of them back there a little ways. And then we built a zip line in there, which they really love. That's a lot of fun. And so that's a treat for the kids after the lesson is done and we've had our snack. They run over to the zip line and we have a lot of fun together. So we just want to make being outdoors, being in God's great creation, learning about God's creation, a lot of fun. And we like to tell the gospel story through some of the things that we find and discover outdoors. So that's what we've been doing now for the last 3 years, and it's been a joy. It's one of my joys as a pastor is I get to teach sometimes there, write lessons, and that has been a lot of fun. And then from doing that Sunday school, we thought we wanted to do a vacation Bible school. And so we were looking for vacation Bible school curriculum. And then that's how I came in contact with Rocha through the Wild Wonder Bible curriculum for kids. We looked at that and said, this is exactly what we would like to do. And so for the past 3 years, we've done that. We're going on our 4th year. We just so appreciate the amount of work they put into writing that curriculum. At least they got 4 years, and then we could start over again, I guess. But no, we do in the same places. The classroom there, just set a table up over the fire pit, but they still use the stumps and stuff. That's one of our classrooms. We have another classroom that's out in the open. Sometimes we use a shade. Sometimes we just sit on the ground on blankets under the trees. But that's another classroom. And then another classroom is a deck that we have cantilevered over the creek, which is kind of a nice you can hardly see it because it's in the trees, but it's a deck and there's water flowing by you. And that's the other classroom that we use. And we just love it. What we do is we are very conscientious about being inclusive in what we do. And so all of our curriculum we adapt for inclusion, and Wild Wonder curriculum is easily adaptable for that. So we appreciate that. There's a lot of things to do for inclusion with that. And we also have refugees. So we have a very diverse group of people that take Wild Wonder curriculum. And they love the music. The songs are a great hit. So that's been a lot of fun. And I can't say enough about how that has been a blessing for us. We limit, because of our number of our teachers and volunteers, we limit the number of kids to 40, but every year we have way more than 40 and we have to turn them away. We feel bad about that, but we want to be able to make our time together profitable time. So we try as much as possible to limit it to 40 kids for the program, but it's just a great program. So another thing we do, our concern about our watershed has also convinced us of the importance of planting trees. So as a result, we have a special service every spring, which is concluded with planting a tree. It's usually around Arbor Day, that type of thing, you know. And it's not that we have just one Creation Care Sunday a year. We try to incorporate this in almost every season of the year. But in the spring, it's just a special time for us. And after the service, you know, they all come out there. The kids love to get involved. Of course, they like to get dirty anyway. The kids get involved. We plant trees along our creek. We're trading out some of the invasive species type things that we have and trying to put more native species along the creek. And that's been a lot of fun, and people just really enjoy it and getting engaged with that. Another thing is, and this was a little bit later on, this has been a recent thing. We've now installed 86 kilowatts of solar panels on our roof to be able to offset our utility bills. And this was made possible through an organization called Solar Faithful, which helps nonprofits finance or come up with the upfront cost for solar. So the solar panels don't necessarily belong to us. And there are other programs that do this, but they've been very good to work with. We have 1 year now in, and we've produced about 100,000 kilowatts in our first year, which is 76% of our consumption, which is really quite a bit. The problem is we don't always we're not using the electricity when we're making it. You know, we have a lot of programs at night, and once you know it, the sun goes down, and we can't make any electricity. So we've been working at trying to come up with a solution for that, and a battery bank is the big solution. But the size battery bank we would need is $83,000. And so that's probably not a solution. But now what we're looking at is getting an EV. You can get an EV with the size batteries, the battery capacity of an $83,000 battery bank, and you can get the EV for about $35,000. But it has to be two-way chargeable. So we're looking now into the future. Since we use a van a lot for refugee ministry, we're trying to look at an electric van that we could use for that, but also use it as a battery bank to use to run our church when the sun's not out. So I think there's real possibilities in that, and we're just looking into that right now as to how to go forward with that. But we certainly are just really appreciative of the green energy, the carbon, limiting our carbon footprint. But I do have to say, I think when we first started being conscientious about creation by working in the creek, our congregation was not ready to hear about carbon footprints, climate change, and some of those things. For us, that would have been a larger leap to get the congregation on board with something like that. And so by starting with something that everybody could see and feel and be concerned about, like they were concerned about our stream and how dirty it was, or the pollution in it, or about the amount of E. coli in our stream, because we have a lot of E. coli in our stream, which we also have tested for. That became a problem, and so they could get right into that. But after that, it would seem like their hearts softened for more aspects of creation care, so that just a couple of years ago, when we started bringing up what is our carbon footprint, how can we deal with some issues with that? What about solar? They were much more receptive, and so that wouldn't have happened before that. But there's a picture of our church and the solar. They got 210 panels up there, and they do make a lot of electricity. It's amazing, and people are just so helpful. We get people over here that say they want a tour of our place because we have a bunch of things going on. And of course, they all want to go up on the roof and look at our solar panels. So they're not easy to get up there. You have to crawl up a shaft and everything to get up there. But I've taken whole classes of a seminary up to our roof to be able to see the solar panels. And Ben Lowe stopped by here, you're right? So you all know Ben Lowe. So what do you want to see, Ben? I want to see your solar panels. So I think there might be a picture he took somewhere out there too of this same thing. So that's pretty exciting. And then other little things that we do that are just fun to do. During the summer, we have Trash Tuesdays when we gather in the evening at church and go up and down the streets. We didn't adopt a street, but we go up and down the streets in our neighborhood and we collect trash. We got the vests on. We just kind of hang out together, fill trash bags. And then afterwards, we go over to a local McDonald's, which is only like half a mile from here, a quarter of a mile from here. And we go get ice cream, and we let them know that we're bringing back all of their trash that they dropped along the roads, because most of the things we pick up has a McDonald's seal on it. And we just jokingly do that. We don't really put it in their trash, but we put it in ours. But we let them know we've been picking up trash around the place, which they appreciate. So that's what we've done. And then we don't use any paper, products or styrofoam, and we have a lot of meals and snacks. We're big eaters over here. So we have a church meal once a month. We have frequent snacks, always have coffee in ceramic cups and stuff like that. And so that's something that everybody has appreciated and enjoys. So let me just kind of sum it up, and we can have some questions and kind of finish the discussion. But I got a couple of little videos to show you. So what began 17 years ago as we adopted Rush Creek has organically led us into being much more conscientious in more areas, and just ways in which we can see God's wonderful creation, and also become better at admiring the natural wonders that we see right here. When I do speak, and I speak sometimes in other churches, and I ask them when I begin the talk, I said, I want you to think about a time in the last 3 years when you felt the closest to the Lord. I give them some time. Just when did you feel the closest to the Lord? And I want you to locate that spot geographically. Where was that spot? So they think about it. So then I say, well, was it at your work? And they don't raise their hand. So I asked them to raise their hand. Was it at home? Nobody usually raises their hand. Was it in church? And surprisingly few people raise their hands, at least for a pastor anyway. I says, was it someplace in creation? And almost 80% of the people will raise their hand. It was someplace in creation. And so they have that spot, whether it was a sun set on Lake Michigan, was it, maybe seeing a deer in the sunrise and a deer blind, going to the Rocky Mountains, something like that. But that's where they see God. And so one of the things we want to do is help people see God in those little things around us all the time, because there's neat things about creation in the macroinvertebrates, in the butterflies, the pollinators. And in our stream, we have Longnose Gar that spawn there every spring. When the water temperature turns 62 degrees, their long nose has a thing there that sense 62-degree water temperatures, and they come streaming into our little creek here. The females have all the dots on them. The males only have dots on their tails, but they're in there to do a spawning run, and they come in there by the dozens. And they're just beautiful, unique creatures that God has created for us to enjoy. So we just want to enjoy them. And when they come up the stream, we say we have to pause now, and we have to spend a little time with some of the creatures that God has given us to enjoy. We do the same thing in the fall. This is fall, was there salmon run in our creek. And so there's two salmon, a male and a female, in what is called a red there. They're spawning. She's laying eggs and he's fertilizing them. And so we're watching this from the deck that's by the creek. And then there's this little salmon that tries to sneak in on them. Salmon life must be interesting and difficult. But so this little tiny salmon, you'll see him starting to come in from the right. He's trying to sneak in there and do his own fertilization. There he got in there. But that big male is not going to let him stay there. So that big male is going to kick him out of there. He's going to slap him in the face a few times, get the little one out of there. And then he's going to try. He's trying to get back in there again. And the big male is just not going to let it happen. So there he goes. And the big male goes back after him and kicks him out. So those things, those life events, that beauty, that thing that God has created is all around us. And we need to pause and see that and give God glory for what he's done. And so this was just a video I took with a bunch of kids watching, and they were amazed and wondered and at all God is doing. So I guess if you want to get steps to get started for caring for your watershed, just quickly to finish up. First, identify your watershed. Every church in the United States is located in a watershed. And if you don't know what that watershed is, you can find that information in a number of different ways. But find out who your watershed is. And that's the first thing to do. Then find an access point. Is there any way to get to that watershed, that body of water? That access point for an urban area might be just a storm drain. But a storm drain would be an access point, because whatever rushes off your parking lot is going someplace, and it's going downstream, it's going into your watershed. And I think for us to be the best neighbors that we can be to our community and to our downstream neighbors in particular is to know that what's going off our property isn't going to pollute somebody else's property. So find an access point. Then find out a local environment groups to work with. There's probably somebody that's doing something. From the county level, county conservation groups, they might know some groups. There might be some nonprofit organizations that are working with it. Find them. They're always looking for more volunteers. They never have enough volunteers. And if you show up and say, hey, we have a few volunteers, could you do something? Could we do something with you? Oh, they would find all kinds of ways for you to get engaged. I then, get connected with the Isaac Walton League. If you have that access point, you can start doing things, doing some surveys with chloride, nitrates, and some things like that, and get engaged. And then, but mostly he says, just get into the creek and have fun. We are now a church that has over a dozen waders and hip boots for people to borrow and get into the creek. And so we really encourage people to get in the creek, spend time there, look for bugs, look for mussels, look for spawning fish, and just really, really have fun doing it. So that's about it. I just want to thank you for your work and caring for God's amazing creation.